Hello, and welcome to The Strange Dominions, where we seek to unlock the mysteries of the unseen and unheard, unknown and unknowable. I am your host, Octavian Graves. Happy 4th of July! I'm very excited about this episode, and I have a feeling that July is going to be a great month for the show. Tonight, I interview Ryan Paul Tramblay about his cryptid research, paranormal podcast called Monster Radio, and his own Fortean research. If you have seen something strange or unusual, such as a cryptid, spirit, UFO, or anything in between, please send me an email at strangedominionspodcast@gmail.com, and you could be a guest on the show. If you have had a Bigfoot experience or a cryptid experience, you will be jumping ahead of the list, as I am really trying to bring a stronger cryptid and Bigfoot presence to the show. If you are enjoying the show and would like to get extra episodes, merchandise, and more, you can become a patron starting at $4 a month. All the links for Ryan's work and our Patreon page will be in the description below. With all that being said, let's get into the interview. All right, and tonight I have with me Ryan Paul Tramblay, fellow podcaster and paranormal researcher and experiencer. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today?
I'm doing very good. I'm very excited to have you on.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. So,
Not a problem.
We'll start off with a basic question. How did you get into paranormal, and how long have you been in the paranormal?
Well, actually, it's cryptids and paranormal. I've been into it for about 20 years plus now. And really what got me into all the stuff is the horror movies I used to watch as a little kid. And most specifically, Godzilla movies, like, War of the Gargantuas, King Kong versus Godzilla. That really sparked my interest in monsters. And then as I got a little bit older, I watched stuff like Ghostbusters, The Wraith, and I started wondering about ghosts and spirits. And it just, one thing led into another. And as you start investigating cryptids, you're going to find yourself investigating the paranormal as well.
So do you put... So you put the cryptids in a different category than the paranormal? You don't kind of like put them all sort of in the same camp?
Yes and no. It depends on which cryptid you're talking about in particular. Like Bigfoot, I believe, is more on the flesh and blood side, whereas things like Dogman have a very, very strong supernatural tie to them. Other ones like the Nedelea, the skinwalkers, right, that is definitely stronger on the paranormal side.
Okay, all right. I can definitely vibe with that. So how long would you say you've been into it? Like since childhood?
Yeah, since I'd say about 20 plus years now. I'm 41, so it's been quite a long time.
And at what point did you really start like researching it and kind of like getting out into the field?
I'd say when I was about 13. I used to live back in New England, and in New England, there's plenty of woods to go around looking. And growing up there, of course, I heard about the Dover Demon. That's a very well-known tale in Massachusetts. So that always sparked my interest as well. So I used to look just for like anything really, Bigfoot, Dover demons. I also had an interest in aliens, extraterrestrials. So I was always looking at the skies for that.
Okay, very cool. UFOs have always been kind of like it's hard for me to contemplate how to research them because like where I live in Maryland, there have been UFO sightings, but right, they're very sporadic and there's a lot of space and time between the big sightings as far as UFOs in Maryland go. And so like I have never been able to really think about how exactly I would research that.
Well, I mean, it's really reaching out to people. It's really who you know in that kind of field. Because they can kind of veer you towards more frequent sightings or people who have had sightings or even, abductions in the case of extraterrestrials.
Okay, yeah, and that's a really good point. I mean, I guess the same thing would be this, for Bigfoot or even ghosts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%.
So let's get into some of your experiences because you've had a couple, right?
Yeah, I did. And actually, my biggest one is my Dogman encounter.
Okay, well, if you want to start with that and then get into some other ones, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay, well, with my Dogman encounter, it's kind of an ironic story because I didn't really believe too much in Dogman. Like, Bigfoot was no problem. I could believe there was a bipedal ape out there, some kind of ape of sorts. But a bipedal canine just made absolutely no sense to me, okay? So as I started studying things like Beasts of the Bray Road and things like that, it just still didn't click with me until I was actually able to see one myself. And what happened with this is I was actually house sitting for a friend here where I live in southern Arizona. And, around the neighborhood, some neighbors were complaining that their pets had gone missing. There were some animal kills that were pretty brutal that people were finding. And I just kind of dismissed it to either coyotes or even, possibly mountain lions, because we do get them here in the town I live in. And so one night, I actually had to go make a final check on his property. It was about midnight, I'd say, in October, maybe. And as I was in his backyard, I kind of heard some weird noises that at first I thought maybe it was a vagrant, because we do get a lot of homeless people that drift through. So on a whim and trying to be intimidating to see if anybody would respond, I yelled out, "Hey!" And at first there was no response, and I kept hearing somebody shuffle in the bushes in the distance. And it seemed like this shuffling was getting closer, like it was inching closer to me, right? And so again, I yelled out, "Hey!" And this time, what was the response was this very deep and very guttural growl. Like it sounded like it came right from this thing's chest, and I could feel the vibrations in my own chest.
Wow.
So
okay.
I was just kind of rooted there. I was like, "Oh my God, what is this noise?" And I thought maybe, okay, could be a bear, maybe, probably not, because we don't get bears very often here. Okay. So as I'm sitting there waiting, I actually see something in the distance. And it's in silhouette. It's at nighttime, mind you. So like I can't really see too well. It's just a dark figure. And it's actually coming closer towards me. And just as it got closer, the security lights that my friend had on his house clicked on. And when the lights came on, there was like an amber glow to this thing's eyes. And it was a very definitive glow. Like it was bright, bright amber yellow. Okay. And I saw it in the light, this thing that looked like a bipedal hyena. So I'm sitting here thinking there's no hyenas in Arizona. Okay. So what am I looking at? So I'm transfixed on this thing, man. Like my eyes are just, locked on this thing until finally logic kicked in. And, I have brothers who are hunters. I have uncles who are hunters. And what they always told me when you come face to face with a wild animal, never, ever stare it right in the eyes. It's a challenge. So I deviated my stare just a little bit to go down, but I could tell that it was still staring right at me.
How close was it from you?
It was about 15 feet.
Wow. Okay. That's really close.
Yeah, that was actually, it was terrifying, man, because, when you don't believe in something and something like that can just crop up right on you, pop up where you are, you're kind of going, what in the heck am I looking at? What is this thing? And your mind tries to race to figure out it's something logical. It's something you've seen before. You're just misinterpreting it. So naturally, my brain said hyena. But then at the same time, my brain's going, no, Ryan, there's no hyenas in Arizona. And hyenas don't stand on two legs.
Yeah.
So as I'm looking at this thing, it can tell I'm looking at it, and I can feel it looking at me, man. I was just getting the chills from even thinking about this. And it charges forward a few feet. So it was a bluff charge.
Okay.
I think it wanted to see if I was going to either A, draw a weapon on it, B, run, or if I was going to challenge it. And because I just stood in place because I was just overcome with fear, it stopped. It stopped abruptly. And I could see its ears going up and down. And like a curious dog, its head was going side to side. So I'm like, what the hell do I do? And it's just like it bared its teeth at me. So I could see this thing had big, big teeth, man. I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to die. But eventually it starts backing up very slowly. And it backs up a few feet. Then it grabs a branch and just kind of hangs on the branch a little bit. Like its feet never left the ground, but it's kind of balancing itself on that branch. And it's just kind of staring at me.
Okay. So it's kind of like using the branches like support?
Yeah. Yeah. And when it stood up, I did definitely hear the loud pop that a lot of people claim they hear when they have dogman encounters. And to me, I've always thought about where did that come from? I thought maybe it was the hips that were maybe changing location as it went from quadruped to biped. But I have to wonder if maybe now it's their feet that are kind of acclimating to the shift of weight.
Yeah, that's what I would probably recommend, like say, because that sounds very like when feet kind of move, like in a weird position or one that you're not used to.
Right. And we also have to stop and think, when you're walking on a quadruped position, when you're on all fours and you stand up, a lot of things in your body have to adjust and change. Your spine, your hips, your legs, your knees, your feet, even your muscles. So it could be the feet that are popping because the bones are just readjusting, but here this thing was. It was just staring at me and starting to finally back up. So as it backed up, I started backing up. And when I got a certain distance, I just took off like a bat out of hell. I got into my friend's house. I was closing his doors, locking his windows. And, like somebody from a horror movie, I'm looking around the house like, where are his knives? Where are his guns? I need weapons. So I could hear this thing actually walking away, though. You could hear it snapping branches and it almost sounded like it was kicking the ground. And I had to wonder if that was a disappointment move. How when somebody doesn't get their way, they kind of kick rock.
Yeah, I do.
I was thinking if maybe that's what it was doing. And I could hear it growling as it was walking away. So once it was, a good distance away, I'm calling up my friend and I'm like, hey, bro, I don't know what you have going on your property, but I saw this bipedal hyena on here. So you might want to come home and check this out. And he thought I was crazy. He's sitting there going, Ryan, there's no hyenas in Arizona. Hyenas don't walk on two legs. I'm not sure what you saw, but it wasn't a hyena. And I'm sitting there thinking, going, you know what? He's right. It's not a hyena. So I actually reached out to a friend of mine who's a very avid dogman researcher. And he told me, you know, people have seen the hyena types, Ryan. So I'm kind of going, so it was a dogman. Oh boy. So yeah, that was my first experience with a dogman.
You know, Dogman really, there's something about it that just, it captivates my mind in a way that like very little things do after I started really researching Dogman.
Right, you're kind of like me because I grew up on werewolves, like the Howling,
Yeah,
American
exactly.
Werewolf, London, and our parents always tell us werewolves aren't real, and then lo and behold, we have our own discovery where we're going, well, werewolves are kind of real in a way.
Exactly. I mean, maybe they don't just totally do the whole full moon thing. Like maybe they exist outside of that cycle, and that doesn't really determine when they come out or anything like that. But they're here. I mean, people see them, people experience them, and they seem to have a flesh and blood aspect to them. But I am not sold on them being 100% a natural animal.
I'm right there with you because I mean, if they were flesh and blood, I think we'd find flesh and blood materials more often, such as scat or even a body. And there's never been any bodies recovered, so it makes you wonder: do they shift into dimensions? Do they disappear somehow?
Right.
So,
and I mean, if you've listened to the show, then you know that one of my going theories is that there is something like when I say spiritual, I'm not saying anything religious. I'm just saying that there is an incorporeal nature to them. They have this ability that it may be that their base nature is of an incorporeal kind, and for some reason they choose to come into this reality and into a physical form to gather up something that they don't have wherever they normally exist. I don't know.
Right. Well, what do you know about the Tulpa effect?
Not much. I know that it is obviously a Tibetan and Buddhist part of that cosmology.
Right.
And it is mostly on the kind of like psychological aspect of it is a manifestation of the subconscious or an element of the subconscious.
Right. And it's actually been used in some horror movies too. Like in a way, it was kind of in the Nightmare on Elm Street thing where the more they feared Freddy Krueger, the stronger he got.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if you want to apply it to the cryptozoology field, you could do it in this sense that so many people started talking about dogmen. They became so fascinated with it, right? That the knowledge of it spread like wildfire.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So even people that weren't cryptid fans, that weren't cryptozoologists or researchers or even enthusiasts for that matter, started hearing about it. And I'm sure a lot of them started getting really terrified of these things. So we do have to wonder if maybe things like Dogman or even, Slender Man to an extent.
Or like a co-creation kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely, I feel like there is multiple things going on at once, and that definitely could, be responsible for a portion of the sightings.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with that.
Yeah, I absolutely feel like that could be, play into it. What are some of your other experiences, both in the cryptid world or in the spirit world, if you want to call it that, or even UFOs?
Okay, well, with the spirit world, there is a place that I frequent when I do my research and investigations, and normally it's supposed to be like a cryptid-based thing. But lately, when I've taken pictures down there, there's always been like these little smoke wisps, as I like to call them, that appear on photographs. Now, they're not there when I'm looking at the place. When I'm looking at a certain patch of foliage or looking at a certain group of trees, it's not there where I can physically see it. But when I snap a photo, they show up in large numbers. And I have found what appears to be grave markings down there. So I got to wonder if maybe this cryptid spot is also kind of a ghost spot. And when I go down there, there are some times where you can hear voices, like disembodied voices.
Do the disembodied voices sound otherwise human?
Yeah, it's always done at almost like a whisper level. They're audible, but you can't make out what they're saying.
Okay, yeah.
And they're always talking so rapidly. And it happened the last time I was there. And it's a shame that even though I was recording, you couldn't hear the voices there. Oh,
yeah. See, nothing ever comes out like exactly how you would hear it on a recording. And I've dealt with that on a couple of my own investigations.
Mm-hmm. It is terrifying. I mean, there was this cross that was made of all these stones. And I noticed everything was pretty much peaceful while that cross was intact, but somebody or something destroyed this cross, and ever since then it's had a very dark vibe to it. Where you're walking down these little passageways down there, and you feel like you're being watched, and you hear these noises, you hear the twigs snapping, and you feel like somebody's walking behind you.
Yeah, I've had that in a couple, in some cemeteries that I've been in, and even some, and this is the thing. I have experienced something very similar to that while looking for Bigfoot in the woods, including the voices that you can't tell what they're saying. They're going very fast. You don't know what language they're speaking, but you can hear voices.
Yeah, and it's very unsettling. As someone who was more into the cryptids and the paranormal originally, I'm kind of going, what is going on here? Is our kids messing with me, or is somebody just pranking me or trolling me? It's just not something you feel really comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. Ghosts are, I make a distinction as someone who does kind of work within the magical realm and the paranormal realm. I make a distinction between ghosts and spirits, as ghosts are just, the souls or the intelligences of dead people, dead humans that are still here. And then spirits are something that never had a body to begin with. It has always been of an incorporeal nature.
So you mean like some kind of energy then?
Well, yeah, I guess that is one way to look at it. What I'm talking about is if you look at the grimoires, right? The spirits that are in that, and I call them spirits. I don't call them demons because I have a very different view of what a demon really is. They can take on these forms, and there are magicians who say that those forms that are described as, that is how they appear.
Okay.
Into a very physical form. It's not about incense or anything like that. It just, that is how they come about.
Interesting.
And so,
okay.
When and there's a couple grimoires, specifically the Book of Oberon and Discovery of Witchcraft. They talk about, there's a few rituals about summoning fairies.
Oh.
And it has a very,
very,
you want to do. Right. Well, it has a very, very corporeal form when it's called. And there's certain acts that you can do with them that, for some reason, are capable. They're possible. It's one of the things that people do with them. I can send you some stuff about that. Yeah, and so it kind of, when you get into magic, you kind of have to adopt an animist worldview.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So you start to see that there are a lot more things that maybe when we were kids and we heard fairy tales, we only ever imagined them as being just fairy tales. But they were based on something that people were experiencing.
Absolutely,
so
that's the way I view it.
Folklore is just a way of people telling people in the future, like, these are the rules, these are the things that exist, and we're going to put them in this kind of sing-songy way, but it doesn't take away from their physicality or their validity.
I am so happy to hear you say that because I specialize in the folklore and the oral traditions of indigenous people.
Okay, very cool.
And a lot of people will say, oh, it's just, it's folklore stories, just fairy tales. And I'm going, no, there's truth in there. They're trying to show you what's going on out there, what they've seen, what they've encountered, what they've run into. You're just viewing it in a very metaphorical way. You need to look at it in the literal translation.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I believe that all folklore has some kind of kernel of truth. No matter how small, there's still truth in there.
100%.
And sometimes you don't even have to decipher it. You read the traditions and you're like, well, there it is.
And the thing is that you can use folklore the same way we would, and it depends on who you ask. I know that there are people who make a distinction between folklore and urban legends as not being the same thing.
Right.
I feel that urban legends are just modern folklore. And what do we as researchers do when we want to go out and look for an area? We look at the urban legends that are attached to it.
Yes, you absolutely have to. I have learned that the hard way, that if you ignore those sort of things, you're not learning all you need to learn.
Exactly. And I think that folklore does the same thing. I think when you have folklore about a certain area, that's because there's stuff there. And that's your map. That's your key to, finding a new area to investigate.
Absolutely. I was once approached because somebody said, how does folklore help in the dogman research? But, a lot of people will say that they encountered a dogman in a graveyard, okay? Well, See, this is where folklore comes in really handy, because in some Native American folklore, the dogmen were the guardians of sacred areas, such as burial sites or worship sites.
Right.
What is a graveyard to us, really? It's a burial site, right?
Exactly.
So there you go. You have these people that spoke of a dogman being seen by their burial sites, and that's what graveyards are for us. Cemeteries are the same exact thing, no different.
Absolutely.
So the fact that people are seeing dogman in our cemeteries, it's like, well, it's the same thing they were seeing back then.
Exactly. And one of the theories that I've been kind of going with for a while now is, if you look at, I don't know if you've ever heard of people who've said that it looked like Anubis, or that they've seen a dogman and then the next night there was like an Anubis-like figure standing over them in their room.
Yes, I have heard that, and that's just like, thank God that didn't happen to me. Man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think that when we look at these kind of figures, because obviously there's Anubis, but then there's also jackal-headed, hyena-headed entities, and there are canine-headed entities within the South American lore as well.
Yeah, like Lycanos too, from the Roman emperor. So
oh yeah, absolutely.
In Greek mythology, it's actually chock full of werewolves and similar
and lycanthropes,
things.
Yeah.
And then you go over to, the Celts. They got the Wolvers, which are basically just friendly werewolves.
Exactly. And so I always wonder if there, what the connection is there between what we're experiencing now with Dogman and what these old mythologies stated about these kind of dog-like creatures.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a deviation in a way, though, because a lot of cultures speak very positively about them.
Right.
And one thing that's always baffled me is how come these cultures spoke so highly of them, but the people that are encountering them now, they're so evil towards them. What is it about humanity that changed where the dogmen have changed so much?
It's funny because there could be dogmen that, or kind of werewolves, we'll just call them that, that are genuinely evil or just ill-tempered towards people.
Mm-hmm. But I don't really believe they're evil, though. I mean,
yeah, I feel the same way. I'm just saying that a lot of people would describe them that way. When they experience them, it feels evil to them. I don't really, it's not that I don't believe in good and evil, but I don't try and put that on non-human things, because that's a very human...
Right, that's what I was going to say, too, is like, evil is a human thing. It's something that, we have the morality, we have the wherewithal to know right from wrong, and we still do wrong, which makes it evil. Whereas these things, if they're animals, be they interdimensional or spiritual or whatever, they're animals, so they don't really have that moral compass of good and bad and something like that. They do what the animals do. It's the nature of the beast.
And one of the, I was talking to a guest last week, B.J. Swain, who's an occult author and magician, and in his book Living Spirits, he talks about the Maryland Goatman, because he's from Maryland as well. And
the Goatman, that one's always been one of my favorites.
Mine too. I mean, I grew up with that legend, and he describes it as just a murderous land spirit that most likely, when we built that bridge and people have been partying there and trashing it, that could be a reason why it's so violent and so why it gets this bad reputation when it comes across people.
I could see that. Yeah, I mean, maybe the same for Bigfoot and Dogman too. They just see how humans behave and they're responding in kind.
And then you also have to look at, how many Bigfoot encounters have you heard of where the person says, oh my God, it was terrifying. It was the most terrifying thing in the world. Well, what did the Bigfoot do? It just stared at me.
Right.
Is it really doing something that's threatening you, or is it just the conception of this creature is so much for you to handle that your mind automatically takes it in a negative light, in a negative perception?
You hit the nail right on the head with that. Yeah. Because it's like, we don't know what they are, and that terrifies us enough. So the fact that they inhabit our space, or what we decree as our space,
absolutely,
really makes us get more terrified of them, which I understand to an extent, but that's not how we learn now.
Right, exactly. And, and I wonder, I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've had what I would call maybe like Bigfoot-like activity, but intellectual honesty, I never saw one. So I can't say that I was in the presence of a Bigfoot. Even though I got the wood knocks and the grunt, I never saw one. So, I try not to assume too much.
Well, I got to be honest. I mean, I think if I saw a Bigfoot, I really wouldn't be terrified at this point. I think I'd be, jubilated, man. I'd be ecstatic. I'd be excited and just unable to contain myself because I want to see a Bigfoot so badly.
See, I feel the same way, but at the same time, I leave room for the possibility that I would be absolutely terrified and I wouldn't be able to really soak in the encounter, because my mind would be running a million miles a minute, trying to think about what this is, what am I doing, what's going to happen, what do I need to do, just kind of going through all the possibilities of this encounter before I could actually like really enjoy it.
You see, I wish I had that kind of logic when I had my Dogman encounter.
Yeah.
But I was that idiot that had to say, "Oh man, Dogman's not real. There's no way these things can exist." And there it is, right in front of me. I'm going, "Oh man, I was stupid."
So, are there any other notable just encounters with the weird?
I think I've actually had Dogman activity while I was out, and that's something that I wish to God I could have recorded. But when I was out a few months ago, it was about evening time where the sun was just starting to set. And there was a lot of these strange barks, and it didn't sound like a normal dog. It almost sounded like a mix with a human vocalization and a dog barking, if you can even imagine that.
Yeah,
And
I can
what
kind of
was
think
happening,
about that.
it was like a really weird, like, like kind of a grunt. And my girlfriend, Ashley, who you're going to have on your show, I showed her pictures of that. I was finding these gourds, these javelina gourds, up in these trees, high up in the trees, though. So it couldn't have been any kids that were just roaming by tying these things up. They were high up on branches where the stem of the gourd was wrapped around the branch of the tree, and it was like interlooped and everything. So it was actually tied on there. So that was really strange because those gourds, that's not something that a human wants to eat, but you could see animals eating them, and they were leaving them in different trees. So I had to wonder, are these things like trying to trade with me, or are they trying to, be
Is this
friends?
like a two-way gifting operation going on?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if it was, because I did leave some pancakes and syrup and bacon in a container up in a tree, and the next day, those were actually gone.
Was the container gone as well, or just the food in the container?
The container was actually torn up. It looked like something clawed at it to get it open.
Okay, all right. That kind of lines up, I guess.
Yeah, and it was very interesting because there were claw marks on different trees as I was going around. I actually have pictures of it that I can show you over on Facebook later on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it looked like something was clawing different trees as I was walking along, kind of marking its territory. Now, bears will do that, okay? But big cats, they don't really do that here in Arizona. So when they're reaching up, it's like just something with one hand is just clawing that tree.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And I have found what looks like some dens as well. And there's this very interesting spot that I go to research where the bamboo there has actually been bent into almost a perfect circle to create this tunnel.
That takes some real maneuvering.
Yeah, it would take some know-how. You have to know what you're doing with that, because if you bend it the wrong way, it's going to break and snap, and that's it. But none of them are broken in any weird way. It's just bent into a perfect circle, and I'm like, man, how strong do you have to be to do this?
And you get that with Bigfoot stuff all the time too.
Yeah, and you do get it occasionally with Dogman. Like, they will have dens that they make that are similar to a Bigfoot, but you have to look for little signs that some people can tell apart. Like Bigfoot, usually you can kind of tell it's more the Bigfoot thing because it has that very musty smell, whereas Dogman almost has that wet dog smell.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And when I go out looking for Dogman, the first thing I actually look at is what kind of game prey would be in the area. Like, what's there? Is there quail? Is there a rabbit? Different kinds of birds? And if those are there, it's a pretty good bet that you could find them there. Like in my area, we have javelina, we have quail, we have some kind of pheasant that's there too. We have jackrabbit, cottontails, so there's adequate prey, there's adequate game. So you got to look for that. Then look for a water supply. Because remember, if you're out in a desert, you're going to have water.
Yeah, of course.
And lo and behold, in my area, I was looking high and low, and I found a water well, so there's an adequate water supply right there.
Yeah, and the same thing with Bigfoot, and obviously ghosts are always, for some reason, around water. That seems to be a pretty common thing.
Well, in some native beliefs, water was meant to contain spirits.
And it's the same thing with ceremonial magic and traditional European magic. If you want to, one of the methods of binding a spirit is to surround the triangle with, water, like brass vessels of water.
Mm-hmm. Because I guess they can't cross water for some reason.
They cannot cross, and if you go by the ceremonial lore, the reason that is because when Solomon was evoking these spirits, he would put them in this brass vessel as a way of binding them and sort of keeping them from ever escaping, and then throwing them into a lake. And then the story goes that 1,000 years later, some people went into that lake and found these brass vessels and unknowingly opened them, and all these spirits flew out, and that's why we're able to work with them today. That's how the lore goes. I can't say the validity of that, but the water is a huge part of it.
Yeah, well, I just learned something new today, so thank you for that.
Yeah,
I
no problem.
appreciate that. But yeah, I do have to wonder though if there's some kind of correlation between the dogman and the spirits, though. I mean,
Well,
Arizona, especially Arizona, it was a very big Native American ground. So are those spirits tied with the dogman that I've had around here, or vice versa? It's hard to answer that.
it is. And I don't know if we'll ever get a real answer. I think we may get close or some kind of little bits of answers here and there that we have to piece together. But I don't know if we'll ever get the full picture.
I'm going to be honest with you. The more I look for answers, the more questions I find.
Yeah. And that's I think that's the same with anyone that is
Yeah, it's
really
kind of a pain
going
in the butt, because you want answers to what you've seen, to what you've experienced, but you just don't get those answers, and it's just so frustrating sometimes. But
yeah.
one thing that does actually stand out, one experience, and it happened pretty close to my house, was I was outside with a friend, okay? And this friend is a very big guy. He doesn't scare easily. And it was about maybe, I don't know, I want to say 11:30, maybe 12:30 at night. We were sitting there just having a cigarette, talking casually, and we heard what sounded like child footsteps. Like you could tell it was a child making these footsteps, and we heard laughing, kids laughing. And so we're looking around going, well, there's no kids around us. So why is this laughter so strong, so high in volume? And we're looking around, not seeing anything. There's no kids out. And then these voices just stopped. And it sounded like people were running right at us. Like you could hear the footfalls just growing louder and louder and more intense.
Right, yeah.
And when we turned to face the source, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So he and I were left sitting there going, what just happened here? There's no kids. There's nobody there. What, is somebody wearing a cloaking suit? What's going on here? And so, that was one night that it happened. And a couple of weeks later, he and I were out pretty close to that same spot, and the same exact thing happened.
And did you say this is near your house?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not too far from the house at all.
And, is your house haunted?
No, that's the strangest thing, is there's no spiritual activity here. But when I go out to that certain area at certain nights, you will hear kids laughing. And it's a very ominous thing to hear kids laughing at night. I mean, it's ominous during the day to a degree. But when you hear it late at night and you're not seeing any kids at all, you're kind of sitting there going, okay, what the hell is going on?
And have you gone to that area as a investigation? I don't know. When you go looking for ghosts, are you doing the EMF readers and things like that?
Yes.
Okay, so a traditional setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, whenever this has happened, though, it's always when I'm not really researching. It's always when I'm just calling it quits for the night and just settling down, and these kids will start laughing, and I'm like, what is going on?
I've had the same thing when I go Bigfooting. And when I go looking for Bigfoot, I won't get anything the entire time. I got all my stuff. I'm out there, and then and I verbalize a lot to the woods. I'll just say okay, I'm leaving now, or stuff like that, to see maybe if if that garners a response. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I do the same thing. I kind of feel like it's showing respect to whatever's in that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they know your intentions. They know you're not messing with anything that might be important to them.
And so what happens a lot of the times is I'll be walking to the car and I'll get a wood knock, or I'll get something pacing me or something like that. But I know that if I stay, it's not going to stop. Or it's going to stop and I'm not going to get anything.
Right. Yeah, I've had that experience too when I was out doing my dogman investigations. I'll hear what sounds like the clicking of teeth.
Okay.
If you can imagine what that sounds like. When a dog gets nervous and you hear them chattering their teeth.
Yes.
I've heard that, and it's always, semi close to me. It's maybe about 20 feet away, but it's loud enough where I can hear it clearly.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, am I making these things nervous? Are they doing that as a way of saying, hey, get out of my territory? We don't want you here. Or is that just their way of getting my attention?
Yeah. There's no way to ever, unless we ask one.
Mm-hmm. And I do tend to talk to them kind of like they're my own pet dog, which I probably shouldn't do because I'm sure that's condescending.
So are there specific areas that you can kind of not guarantee, but that you can get a lot of evidence from, or more common
I have
encounters?
Found the perfect spot, because the spot that I go to actually is just a short distance from where I had my original encounter.
Okay.
So, if you follow the hill and the riverbed from where I had the encounter at my friend's house, it leads right to where I do my research.
Okay.
And it's actually a riverbed. It's a washway. And if you know Arizona washways, there's a lot of tunnels. There's deviations from the main riverbed that, go off in this direction and that direction. So there's a lot of places that these things could actually hide.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know much about Arizona or the Southwest as far as top, geography and things like that.
Right. Well, a lot of people think that Arizona is just like, the Looney Tunes desert, and really it isn't.
No, I know that
There's
there
a
are
lot of
like
places
woods
that,
out there. I mean, there
yeah,
is trees and it's not just sand and rock.
right. I mean, a lot of people don't actually remember that in the mountains, like the Mogollon Rim, we have forests, lush forests.
Hmm.
Mount Lemmon, the Rincons, they all have lush forests that people go up to for tourism.
Right.
So we have places like that down in the valley as well. And there's so many places that these things could actually live and hide because there's water sources, there's food sources.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In a small town like the one I live in southern Arizona, in a small town, you're not going to really get bothered by anybody.
Yeah. Now, one thing you brought up, food sources. I've always wondered, and this is another question that I always have when it comes to Bigfoot is.
Mhm.
Is there any kind of a noticeable decrease in the wildlife population of where these cryptids are seen? Because you would have to imagine that these things are big, right? And
Right.
they would need a lot of protein to keep going.
I think what they do is, since there's not really a decline in the amount of prey animals, I think they rely on other things like grass and berries and maybe even certain trees, because the bark of some trees can actually have some nutrients for some animals as well.
I definitely have heard about like Bigfoot being omnivorous, but I always kind of assumed that Dogman would be strictly carnivore.
That could vary because there is the Maned wolf. I don't know if you know what those are.
The maned wolf, the one in South America,
Yeah, and they
it's kind of like a
actually
fox,
have.
right?
It's not a fox, and it's not really even a canine.
Oh,
That's the
okay.
really weird thing. But they actually have to eat a certain fruit that grows down in South America because their digestive tract, their well-being depends on it. If they don't eat this kind of fruit, I forgot what it's called, but if they don't eat it, their body gets very frail and they get very sick and they can die if they don't eat this stuff. So maybe Dogman too has to rely on a certain amount of vegetation to keep its body wholesome and able-bodied and not just rely on meat.
Yeah, and I know that like dogs, if they
Mhm.
have like an upset stomach, they will eat grass as a way to regulate their stomach.
Yes, they will. They absolutely will. So, it's possible that like Bigfoot, dogmen are omnivorous too. I don't see why they wouldn't be. I think that would actually be easier for them.
Probably. Yeah, it definitely would. You just got to question. I guess the question is, how does this thing like? There doesn't seem to be an evolutionary reason for it to exist. You know what I mean? Like
No,
if we're just
no,
going from a biological point of view.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense at all. I mean, the closest thing I can even liken it to is maybe the prehistoric hyenas.
Hmm.
But even that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I've discussed this with Ken Gearhart, and he kind of agrees with it. It just doesn't seem feasible, because I mean, adaptation or part of evolution would require that they go from being quadruped to bipedal? It doesn't make sense.
Because we know that wolves are already very, very well equipped for their habitat. I mean, they've been around for
Yeah,
millions of years, and they've been hunting and surviving just fine.
yeah, and they are pretty much the perfect form of evolution as far as canines go.
Right.
And I'd imagine if like there was another need for evolution in the canines, that the wolves would actually have that similar evolution as well, that similar adaptation. And since they don't have it, you're kind of going, all right, well, are they really even earthbound animals?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
possible that these werewolves or dogmen, whatever you want to call them, are interdimensional? That's something that Ashley and I talk about quite a bit. Maybe they come from a different dimension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that has a part to play in it. Like I said, I feel like there is if you look at a pie chart, right?
Right.
There's percentages to each and every theory that has validity to it, that has like a truth that plays into it, and it's not all just one thing.
True, very true. And if you also look at how some people claim to have shot at these things,
Mm-hmm.
the interdimensional theory is heavily supported in that part because they always claim they're bulletproof.
Right, exactly. And
Now,
Bigfoot does the same thing.
my belief is that if they're interdimensional, maybe their vibration or their energies are different, where the bullets just phase right through them, and that would also explain why some people see them cloaking. It's not
Okay,
really
yeah,
them cloaking; it's them slipping back into their own dimension.
That's very interesting. I never really thought about it that way.
It's a lot of things that I think about because as a dogman researcher, you do have to be mentally prepared, I guess you could say.
Yeah, of course. Maryland has a dog man. It's called the Dueyo, and it apparently.
Oh yeah.
Have you done research on that?
Oh yeah, I absolutely love that one. In fact, I'm gonna have to bug Ashley so we can do a video on that one.
Yeah, that's the one I've been wanting to really kind of investigate. I know where the lore has it placed, and I've been there a couple times, and I
Okay.
would not be surprised if there were upright walking canines running around there. I just it's been like I'm curious about how you research Dogman specifically, because I know how to do to Bigfoot, and I know how to do ghosts, but UFOs and like sort of the more obscure cryptids, I've always been trying to scratch in my head, like, how exactly do I approach it?
Well, in my experience, really, it doesn't differ too greatly from Bigfoot. Okay, you got to learn how to separate the Bigfoot structures from what might be Dogman. Okay, because Bigfoot's known to make the teepees or the things that look like leanways or whatever, and Dogman just doesn't do that.
Okay.
From my experience anyway, and you got to look for physical markings. If they're around, you're going to find maybe scratches on trees. And I would urge you to really look into the different wildlife that's in the area. Like if there's big cats there, kind of see if anybody knows what their scratch marks look like.
Yeah, I knew what bear scratch marks look like. Big cats, the state says there aren't here. I know that people have seen cougars and mountain lions in Maryland. It's probably very rare, but it does happen.
Right. So then you get a lot of it covered. But, just look for how high the scratch marks are. If it seems too high for anything else you might have in the area, then chances are you can go, okay, there's possibly a Dogman here. And then look at how the wildlife acts. So, if they act skittish around you, that's because they're used to predators being there.
Right.
I keep telling people that, when you go out, if the quail and the rabbits don't really run from you, chances are there's nothing preying on them. Okay. Because it's going to be in their own evolution, their own adaptation, that if there's predators in large numbers or some big predator down there, they're going to run from you no matter what, because you're on two legs, you're bigger than them, they're going to take off. Yeah. Now, if they don't take off, then chances there's no predators there. But from what I've seen, even the javelina will take off on me.
Okay. Yeah.
When you see a pack of javelinas, if you know anything about javelinas, dude, they're little bastards, okay?
Okay.
They can be downright jerks. They're pretty much wild pigs in a way, though they're not really pigs. They're pickery.
Okay.
Right?
All right. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, they can be incredibly aggressive. Anybody who's come across a pack of javelina know you're in trouble if you cross them, especially if they got babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that plenty of times where this big group of males and females and even infants will take off like a bat out of hell the minute they see me.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So that tells me that, okay, something is preying on these things. Because if they just take off and freak out like that, there's something that already gives them
something bigger that's running around there, killing them.
Right. And also watch where they go. Watch where the animals go. If it looks like they're avoiding a certain area, like, they're running everywhere but there, and they won't go to feed there, they won't go to drink water there, that's the spot you want to pay attention to, because there's a reason they're avoiding it.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I have a question about your Dogman experience.
Okay.
And obviously, if you don't know, you don't know, and that's totally okay. I would not expect you to think about this.
Mm-hmm.
When you saw it, can you remember the direction that you were facing when you saw it? What direction it was
I cannot.
In? Okay. Now, I would be very interested to hear if you kept that in your mind when you do research. When you hear stuff see stuff, what direction you saw it in. I'd be very interested to see what your results were with that.
I may have to start analyzing that, though. I'm sure there's a reason for that.
Well, yes, because spirits, whether it's in the grimoires or in folklore or anything like that, very, very directional based. There are spirits that show up only in the east. There are spirits that only show up in the west and north, south.
Wow. All right. I did not know that, though.
And it doesn't go for just the goetic spirits. Land spirits do the same thing.
Well, okay. You and I are definitely going to have to talk more off the air about that. I want to know a lot about that.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
That's very fascinating. Ooh, I need to make a note of that.
Yeah, it's something that you don't really hear about when it comes to either even ghost encounters or cryptid encounters, and I can imagine why. I mean, when you're in the moment, you're not really thinking oh my God, there's this thing standing right in front of me. It could kill me. What direction is it standing in? I get that. But afterwards, it would be interesting to see how many people,
I wish that I had now. I really do. But, like I was explaining earlier, I was just overcome. I had no idea what it was I was looking at. When I first saw this thing, I'm going, a hyena? What the hell? Why is there a hyena in Arizona?
Right, absolutely. And not everything, it could be totally random as far as what directions these things show up, and it may not be beholden to
Yeah.
that whatsoever. It's just a little thing to tick off the box,
Right. I mean, that's definitely something to consider, though, and it's something I'm going to have to, talk to you more about.
Absolutely.
Because that would be really interesting to see if there's something in common with all these sightings.
Mm-hmm. Now,
That'd be, wow.
do you get dogman reports like sent to you, or people telling you about their own?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll have people that call me, people that message me over on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And if they're close by, I will definitely look into it personally. And if I can't, I will speak to them over the phone about it.
Have most of them all been, I just saw a dogman, or I saw a dogman last week and now I have weird other stuff happening?
Some of them have actually been that, okay, so I saw a dogman on this date. And then oddly enough, on this date, just a few days later, this really weird activity in my house began. So I'm kind of going, oh my.
Do you feel that there's a connection there, or do you think it's just kind of like once the paranormal sees you?
There could be. I think there could be. I mean, I think, as odd as it's going to sound to say this, I think it depends on what type of dogman they've seen. If it was more I don't want to say natural. Let's just say the interdimensional kind. Okay. If they've seen that kind, then they're not really prone to have any spiritual activity on their property after that. Now, if it's somebody that's seen like maybe a tulpa, okay, and you do have to wonder about that, because I have noticed something that when it's the tulpa type, they report the red glowing eyes. And those are the ones that usually say, oh, this weird stuff started happening at my house or at my work, or I started hearing voices when I'm doing this. So I'm kind of going, are these tulpas like messing with people's minds, or, what's going on here?
Well, I mean, I know that John Keel said that if something has red eyes, it's absolutely paranormal. There's nothing natural about it.
I would believe that. I would definitely believe that because, when people say, oh, I saw this with red eyes, there's always some weird events that either happened before, during, or even after, so it's like there's got to be a connection to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like I said, there's a lot going on with this stuff, especially Dogman. I think there's a lot going on with Dogman. But
I do too.
And I wonder about, so how many types are there? Because I know about the types of Bigfoot, but I don't really know the specifics. I know there are different types of Dogman, but I don't know what the specifics are of each one.
Well, there's about 4 of them that I can recollect off the top of my head. You get the dog soldiers type, the one with the pointy ears that look, like your traditional werewolf, or even the Van Helsing werewolf. And then there's one that I don't really feel belongs in the Dogman chart, where it's got the human-like legs and the baboon-like face. To me, that's always screamed Gugwi. That doesn't scream Dogman. So it seems like that one should be pushed off the chart. And then you get the fat heads. That's what people call them, because they have these abnormally large heads, which people believe are government experiments set loose on civilization. And then you get the type 2, the kind of I saw, which is the more hyena type. And then there's people that even report like almost like a man-like face covered in, dog fur, or looking like the Wolfman. Then you got the American Werewolf in London type, which to me, that doesn't scream Dogman. That's got to be something else, because to me, Dogman should be something that's bipedal, not something that's constantly quadruped. I think if it's quadrupedal all the time, then that's probably something else. Because it just doesn't scream Dogman to me. And it's like, it's like the other kind that I was describing with the baboon face. That should be slid off the chart of Dogman and maybe put into a different category. So, yeah, there's plenty of types. I mean, I think maybe it's like now it's like 7 or 8 of them, maybe even 9.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of Bigfoot types too, and they're very regional.
Oh yeah, you got the patty type, you got the the relic hominid, the Neanderthal, you get the chimpanzee type, which they call the wood boogers.
Have you noticed we're gonna get to Bigfoot, I promise, but just one more thing about the Dogman. Have you noticed any frequency in types based on the coasts? So like East Coast, West Coast have a frequent type that people see?
Yeah, my area, like Arizona, Mexico, California, we get more of the hyena types. Whereas back east, I've noticed it's more the dog soldiers or Van Helsing type.
Okay, that would make sense, because that's usually what I always hear about when I hear about reports from Maryland or Pennsylvania or New York State.
Yeah, I spoke to one lady who described a fox-like Dogman. I'm kind of going, is that even a Dogman, or is that something else? Because there is a Japanese spirit that takes on the form of a fox. So I'm kind of going, is that a dogman, or were you seeing something spiritual there? So yeah, I have noticed, so that certain areas, like even Florida, has like its own kind of dogman. It's got the shorter snout, and it's smaller in stature, and it's skinnier.
Yeah,
So
I
you
didn't
got
know
to
that
wonder,
Florida
is
had
this
it.
a
I knew
regional
that there
or
was dogmen there. I didn't know that there was like a specific type that was in Florida.
Yeah, there's not too many reports that come out of Florida. Not a whole abundance of them. Like, you get a lot from Michigan, from Texas, but you don't get too many out of Florida.
Yeah, and I have family in Florida, so that might be an area for me to research as well.
You can look for the skunk ape while you're down there too.
Oh yeah, I've been wanting to do that for a while. I just haven't been able to get into the swamps quite yet, but it's coming.
When you do that, you should reach out to a guy named Bigfoot Anon, Connor. Yeah, oh my God, this guy, he is so contagious with his positive energy, dude. You're going to love him. You're going to be like, oh my God, I don't want to leave Connor. He's so awesome.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love that.
He's a great guy. And look him up on YouTube. He is a terrific guy, and I can't recommend him enough.
I definitely will. So let's get into Bigfoot. Let's get into the big man. What has your research, like, what has your experience been with Bigfoot, and how, like, what kind of research have you been doing, and what have you discovered about the possibility of Bigfoot?
Oh, my experiences actually were like the earlier experiences that I have, the earliest ones. I used to go to the mountain range in Tucson, Mount Lemmon, to look for Bigfoot, because people have seen them up there. Despite the amount of tourism they get up there, people have seen Bigfoot. And, I've always heard that they look like some kind of ape, or, even one guy told me, oh, I saw a baboon up there. And, to me, that was kind of one of those things of withdraw and retreat, because every time I think of the baboon-faced Bigfoot, I think Gugly, and I'm going, oh, no. I'm not messing with that. But I have seen structures up there. And I have heard noises up there. One time when, many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, a group of friends and I actually rented a place up in Mount Lemmon. And all behind the place that we were staying, you could hear these hoops and howls that weren't people. And it was the distinct, the whoop, whoop that you hear from Bigfoot. And as we were looking out there, you could occasionally see eyes just going by, like floating eyes just going by. It's very creepy. And unfortunately my friends were cowards, but they didn't want to go looking with me. So I'm going, man, prime opportunity to do some Bigfoot investigation.
Yeah. See, that's been my biggest issue getting out into the field, is like, there's not very many people that will go with me, or have the time, or even the courage to come with me. Even though a lot of them don't believe it, they still, for some reason, oh no, I'm not going out there at night. Well,
that's my friends too. They were like, oh, those things aren't real. And I'm like, okay, then go with me. No, man, we're good.
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
It is. It really, really is. I mean, that's kind of why I do it solo.
See, I've done it solo during the day, and I've had some interesting activity. And at night, I'm not opposed to it, but my only concern is the lack of visibility.
Right.
And me being alone out there, what's going to, whether it's a spirit or a flesh and blood, doesn't matter. Something that has that opportunity, it's going to take it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to also think about, known animals, the predator animals, and you got to worry about humans. Unfortunately, you do have to worry about other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Maryland's no stranger to that. I mean, Baltimore is a war zone at the moment, and has been for a long time.
Right.
And even in the woods, you just never know.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I mean, even me, man, I love to have faith in humans. I really do. But I'm more afraid of them at night than I am any animal.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Also, ticks. I cannot stand ticks. It's my biggest, it keeps me out of the woods more than anything.
See, I don't have to worry about ticks in Arizona. What I do have to worry about, though, are the rattlesnakes here. So I'm like, yeah. You want to be really careful of those. But yeah, I mean, if you ever decide to go out at night, definitely go armed, man. Go armed. Make sure you got some kind of protection on you that, in case some idiot gets too jumpy with you, you can take care of it. You don't have to kill him. Threaten him within an inch of his life and put the fear of God into him. But you don't have to kill him. And even if an animal, some kind of animal decides it's more daring than it should be, you got to be safe. You got to be protected. I mean, I don't really like going out at night by myself either. And I'm one of those guys that's a risk taker. So I'm like, I want to do it, but I don't. So
I also want, if I were to see, the reason I want someone else is to be able to say, I want to make sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing, and that I'm not totally insane.
Right. That's a very, very good idea. And that's definitely what we should do. And chronicle everything that you do. If you see things that you think might be evidence, take photos of it, take video if you can. And always debunk yourself. That's what I always try to do first, is I try to debunk myself and look at other possibilities before going, oh, it's definitely this. But I mean, I have seen things like, I was mentioning those whiffs of smoke. That's just something that I can't figure out. I don't know where they come from.
Yeah, these anomalous whiffs of smoke. I've seen them. I know a lot of people who've experienced them, and they don't seem to have any origin point.
Yeah, I mean, when I've taken pictures of them and they show up, there's never any smoke going on. I don't smoke cigarettes when I'm investigating because, the smell of tobacco. So I don't smoke. So when I get the photos that have those trails of smoke in them, I'm going, where is this coming from? It wasn't there when I took the picture. And nobody can give me a straight answer. So.
And so have you actually, so you haven't seen a Bigfoot yet, have you?
Not as of yet. I'm hoping that maybe this year, fingers crossed, that I will see one either here in Arizona or when I get out to Ohio with Ashley.
Have you had any close possibility encounters? You felt like it was right around the corner and it just never showed?
Yeah, when I was up at the Rincons a couple of years ago, we were hiking and we caught this whiff of this terrible, terrible smell. And at first I thought maybe it was a dead animal or whatever, but after looking around, there was no corpse found, but it seemed like wherever we went, this smell was following us, and we could hear something that was trailing us from a distance. So I always felt that that was a Bigfoot. And my friend, who was actually a non-believer, he was a big-time skeptic up until that point. When we had that little experience during our hike, even he had to agree. He's like, Ryan, I think that was a Bigfoot, man, because of the distance between the footsteps, the footfalls. It sounded like it was taking really long strides.
Yeah. And I've heard that, when me and my ex co-host, he used to help me with the show, but he's kind of gone on and done his own thing. But when he and I would go out, we were out one night and we got the footfalls tracing us and kind of pacing us out. And we tested it. We would walk and then stop, and then it would walk and stop a little bit after us. It was a delay, but it was definitely a very bipedal thing that was mimicking us as best it could.
Right, it was trying to use your footsteps to cover its own footsteps. Yeah, and we never saw anything physically, but you just, the feeling. You know what it's like that when something is there and it's looking at you, the pressure that you feel.
Absolutely. Now, what kind of
what's that?
What kind of stock do you put in the structures? Do you feel that is absolutely 100% Bigfoot evidence, or do you feel that there's anything else to that?
I do believe that there is something more to that, because I do have friends who are survivalists, and they have shown me how they actually make, teepees and lean-tos that are very similar to what people are so convinced are Bigfoot structures. And some people say that the big teepees you find are absolutely Bigfoot. Not always, because my survivalist friends make that very same kind of thing for shelter when they go out on their little survivalist excursions. So I think we have to take into account, how big are the trees that are being used to make these structures? Are they something that a human could lift? Are they too big for a human to lift? I think if it's something that's too big for a human to do, then you can lean towards it's possibly Bigfoot. Now, if it's something that a human could actually lift, you have to remain in that middle aisle and go, okay, it could be a human doing this.
And I always wonder, I have yet to find whether it's a recording or a written account of someone saying, I was in the woods and I watched a big hairy ape thing lifting trees and making a structure out of it. You know what I mean? I've never heard about anyone actually witnessing a Bigfoot making a structure.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, you would think of all the structures that people have found that somebody, even one person, would have been there to witness the construction. I mean, it's logical to think that. So I think a lot of them are done by survivalists. And I think, just because we want to find evidence so badly, we're so excited about it, that we jump to that conclusion that it's Bigfoot when it may very well not be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that happens a lot in any area of the unexplained.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we want to see something so badly. Let's face it, even enthusiasts, researchers, and even people on TV, we want to find something so badly that, sometimes we just jump the gun.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you make of, and we talked a little bit about this with Goatman, but what do you make of the more, just the really weird cryptids, the ones that just seem to defy any kind of logic, like Goatman or the Jersey Devil, or out here in Virginia we have this Nallygaster and things like that?
The Jersey Devil's actually been one of my favorites for a long time too. And, I want to believe so badly that there was something to that. I still kind of do. But yeah, I also have to wonder, are some just, like a propaganda sort of thing? Was the sightings and all the reports a propaganda to kind of push people out of there? Because, I mean, that's one of the cryptids, if you want to call it a cryptid, which I don't think I want to because that's more supernatural. When you get down to the origins of the Jersey Devil, it's definitely more supernatural. It's not the definition of a cryptid. But it's like, why did the sightings stop so abruptly? It's just like no more sightings. Was it just popular for a time and then it went away?
Well, I mean, the same thing with Goatman. We don't really get modern Goatman sightings. Its heyday was from the 50s to the 70s, really.
Yeah, and it's, somebody once said that the Goatman was actually seen not too far from where I live, that it was seen on a highway going to Tucson. And I've always wanted to look into that, but, it's kind of hard to do because, a highway, you can't just go and do an investigation along a highway.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be kind of a difficult task.
Well, depending on the highway, it can also be illegal, so you can go to jail for doing it. So, so you wouldn't want to do that. But, I do love the Goatman. The Goatman has been one of my favorite subjects as well, and I do want to believe it's out there. And it's a very fascinating monstrosity, I guess you could call it, because I don't think even that would be a cryptid.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that is. I feel confident that would be something that is incorporeal at base. Like its base nature is incorporeal.
Right, and I mean, it could have occult origins. It could have any kind of dark origin that we could even imagine. So, is it a cryptid though? No, but another one that a lot of people like to mistake as a cryptid is the Nedelea, the Navajo skinwalker. And
the other thing,
with all the
people love
I've
to
done,
make that the catch-all, right? Like the second there's any kind of weird stuff or anything weird seen, it's a skinwalker. Like immediately,
right.
It's a very popular thing right now.
When I talk to people about that, because I've done so much research on the Nedelea, a lot of people are calling me the skinwalker guy. And I call it whitewashing because, it's like, it's a Native American thing. And if you talk to Native Americans about it, which I have, believe it or not, there are Native Americans that if you approach them the right way and you're showing respect to their traditions, they will open up to you about the Nedelea. And they've always told me, these things don't just show up to scare somebody. If they show up, it's with a very individual intent. These things are there for a reason, and they're not going to just go away until whatever they're there for is accomplished. So say somebody sees one, on their property, according to the people I've spoken to, it's there to get that person. It's not there just to scare them. It's not there to just, show up once in a while and spook them. It's usually there to kill them. That's what Nedelea do. So I think there's been a lot of discrepancy because of, maybe social media, creepypastas.
Oh yeah, I mean TikTok. There was a whole thing on TikTok for a while, and the only reason I'm on TikTok is because I feel the need to keep up on whatever is trending in the paranormal talk, whatever you call it, ghost talk, whatever.
I get that. I kind of stay away from TikTok because of all the hoaxes that people put on there. But I think there's definitely been a deviation from what the Nedelea really stand for and what they do, as opposed to what people think they do.
Now, what is the difference between a skinwalker and a Wendigo? Because I know they're not the same thing, right?
Oh, no. They're very, 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 very different. And it's funny you brought up the Wendigo because I'm also known as the Wendigo guy.
Well, I always hear those two things conflated. I've always heard them used interchangeably, and I've always felt that's not exact. That's not accurate.
This is where people have to draw the line because a Nedelea, a skinwalker, they start out as a shaman or a witch, if you will, that is taught a very, very dark art. It's a very forbidden art amongst the Navajo. It's one of those things they do not condone. And in order to get the powers that they are seeking, they usually have to commit some pretty heinous acts, be it, killing somebody they love or even incest and impregnating someone they love. Okay. So
yeah, that's pretty heinous.
Yeah, it's kind of deplorable. It's a little horrifying when you really get down to the true origins of it. But they weren't always evil either, though. As shamans, they were once used for good, but there was a war between two tribes that took place. And so the skinwalkers were kind of allotted the whole vengeance people. They were the soldiers, the warriors to actually battle this other tribe. And so through that, because they had to go through really diabolical means to get the powers they needed to battle this other tribe, they became evil in a way. Okay. So that's what a skinwalker is. Now the Wendigo is something that belongs so much in the paranormal / supernatural because it's a spirit. It is a spirit that possesses a man, a woman, or even certain animals after they've broken certain cultural taboos. And a lot of people will say it's just cannibalism that will turn somebody into a Wendigo. That's not true. Greed can do it too. If somebody's too greedy or too arrogant, too full of themselves, and they're breaking these taboos by being just a jerk in general, this whole essence of the Wendigo can actually go into them, and it changes them not only mentally, but it also changes them physically. They become a literal monster.
It's interesting that there's parallels to that and Norse mythology, where one of the big issues in Norse culture was not murder, it was oath breaking.
Right. Well, I mean, that's slighting one's honor. That's being dishonorable, and it's breaking a cultural taboo.
And so a lot of the lore talks about, people, one of the fates of dishonorable people is where you get the revenant. That's where you get kind of like the Norse undead form.
Right. Very much true. And it's very similar. It really is. And I think that's where a lot of the inspiration for the stag-headed Wendigo came from. And a lot of that, too, comes from Algernon Blackwood's book, The Wendigo, because he drew the Wendigo with horns. But what people don't understand is those aren't really horns, so to speak. It's branches, because people that fall to the Wendigo are known to cover themselves in limbs and leaves and branches to give themselves a more intimidating appearance.
Okay. I did not know that.
So yeah, it's a lot different. The Skinwalker and the Wendigo should never be compared to one another.
Yeah, I mean, they do and they will, but I absolutely agree that they're two separate things and should be kept separate.
Yeah. Yep. In fact, I don't know which one is worse, a spirit that takes you over or the power to change into an animal so you can kill people. I really don't know which one would be worse.
Right, yeah. I don't know. Spirits are very interesting to me, but they are, they have abilities and they can really mess stuff up.
Mm-hmm. Well, a reason why I say that the Wendigo is more on the spirit side, and you might agree with this, is because they do have measures that they take in order to either slow the transformation or even stop the transformation. And the funny thing is one of the measures they use, it's a very, very simple thing. It's beef tallow. It's beef fat.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah, they heat up this beef fat and they feed it to the person that's going Wendigo, as they would say.
Do you know why that's really interesting? All right, so within ceremonial magic, and I'm talking very traditional grimoire stuff, right before the ritual, you are supposed to take usually 9 days. Some grimoires, like the Hygromantia, which is one of the earlier ones, it prescribes 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, you have to stay abstinent, you have to fast, you have no meat whatsoever. You cannot eat any meat. And you have to wash very, very thoroughly. And a lot of people would look at that and say, "Oh, that's a religious thing. It's piety. It's living like a monk." And while there may be an element to that, a lot of magicians who do this kind of thing, they are insistent that it is a practical reason, because when you eat meat and when you have sex, the spirits can smell that, and they hate it. They do not like the smell of humanity in general, let alone sex and meat. And so when we don't eat meat and we don't have sex, it is more enticing for the spirit to come and work with us than it would be if we just, kind of just showed up in robes after eating a steak and gotten laid. It would not really work that way. And so that, eating meat it seems to be a deterrent for all kinds of spirit forms.
Very interesting. So then the beef tallow would actually fall right in line with that.
Absolutely, to keep that from happening, yeah.
See, in the case of the Wendigo, what they do is they heat up that beef tallow, and they believe that if somebody's going Wendigo and they ingest that, not only does it give them the nourishment so they're not, going and starving, it's because it thaws out the heart of ice and the ice around the bones of the person becoming a Wendigo, thus destroying the Wendigo spirit inside of them.
Okay, that is fascinating. I don't know if you would know this, but how often does this happen? Is this something that the Native Americans feel happens on a current basis, or is it mostly like a bygone phenomenon?
That depends. That depends on which tribe you speak of. Like the Algonquins believe it can happen anytime, and then like the Cree will tell you that it happens yearly. In fact, they had this animal that they called the Wendigo, or they called it the calf killer. Also, that's what they told the white men, was it was calf killer because it was killing the bison calf. And it would raid the fields every year, and it would only kill the calves. It would leave the adult males and adult females alone, but it would murder the infants. And to me, that seems like maybe it's a way of killing innocence, because it's a baby. And if you know anything about Native American lore, the bison is very, very sacred. So when you're killing a baby bison, you're kind of killing their hopes. You're killing their future.
Right. You're limiting the ability for them to progress as a
Right.
Right.
So it's almost like it was the Wendigo purposely doing things just to harm the tribe, to harm the people.
Yeah. It definitely sounds like it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about spirits like that, or cryptids or things like that, we have understanding of sort of what it is, or what it looks like and what it acts like. Have you encountered anything in your research that you just cannot describe, or like just is completely outside of what we normally experience, even in the weirder sects of life?
Well, I mean, I did speak to one guy that he said that he had an encounter with this humanoid, right? Which I thought maybe was a pale crawler at first. And he was claiming that he was making trades with this thing. Like, he would meet this thing down at this tunnel every now and again just to trade rocks for gems, for jewels and stuff. And I'm like, that's very unusual. Why would this thing trade rocks for jewels with you? I mean, what?
Yeah. What would have made him so special?
Right. And he's giving it just plain rocks, like rocks that he would find in his garden. And I'm going, but why though? What value would that have to that thing if it's giving you gems and jewels?
Yeah. That seems like an uneven trade-off there.
Yeah, it's like, so is this thing going to come back and beat you up for ripping it off later on? Or
how many times was he doing this? Like, was it a repeat thing, or was it just once or twice?
According to him, it was a repeat thing. Like, if he didn't show up, this thing would show up at his house and on his property and like torment him until he came out.
Interesting. I mean, it begs the question about what these things value and how different their perception of this kind of stuff is for us. Like, to us, gold is really important, right? But to some of these things, it could mean nothing. It could be absolutely worthless.
That's something to take into account too, because I always just took it like maybe it was just trying to lure him out, like gain his trust.
Right. But I mean, if it hasn't hurt him yet, and he's been doing this multiple times.
Well, I think the word here is yet. Because I mean, pale crawlers are known to be pretty aggressive. Those pale humanoids can be pretty violent when they want to be.
How common are those? Because that's something I've only heard about recently. That is not something. I mean, I've heard about rakes. Is that kind of the same thing?
I believe it is the same exact thing. In fact, I think people are misidentifying these pale humanoids as the rake. And a very unpopular opinion that I have, and Ashley has it, my friend Nate Brislin has it. He's a researcher that focuses on these pale humanoids. The rake, it's actually not real. It's just
it's a creepypasta. I remember when that came out.
Right. And I think a lot of people, they see these pale humanoids, and because they're so familiar with the rake, they give whatever they saw the name the rake, which I can understand to a degree, but really they don't look identical to the rake, because the rake is always depicted as no mouth, black eyes, and it has long, long fingers. And from what I've heard from people that have encountered them, they don't have those super long fingers. They have a mouth. So it's like, well, what makes you think that's the rake? So it's a pale humanoid. We call them pale crawlers. And what I envision when I see those is those things from the movie The Descent.
Okay, yeah. Anybody
who's seen that?
I have a very unpopular opinion about that movie. The first 30 minutes are fantastic. They're some of the best horror I've ever seen. I wish they would stop showing the monster so much so quickly.
I would agree with you on that, because I am one of those old school horror movie fans that I believe the less you show, the scarier it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, like, even if it's just a shadow or like a limb, right?
Right. A prime example of the less you see, the scarier it is, Jaws.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Look how long it took for us to actually see the shark, and in the meantime, before we saw it, we were petrified of it. But once we saw the actual shark, we were kind of like, nah.
Yeah, it was kind of, it didn't live up to the expectations. I'm assuming you've seen the movie Exists, right?
Oh, yeah. I am a movie buff. If there's a cryptid movie out there, a horror movie out there, I have definitely seen it.
Okay, see, I think that's one of the best Bigfoot movies ever made.
I do too. I agree. Eduardo Sanchez knocked it out of the park.
The suspense and the eeriness of it. It's not scary. It's eerie. It makes you uncomfortable, like genuinely.
Mm-hmm. Well, the way that Brian Steele, the guy who played the Bigfoot, portrayed that thing, he did it so well. You can tell that Eduardo Sanchez was actually a very big Bigfoot enthusiast. He really loved the subject, and he actually put effort into writing how this thing should move, how it should run, how it should behave. So he actually did his research for that.
Yeah, and it definitely shows because like it's very accurate and it's very, very terrifying because the fact you don't really see it until the very end, and it's a very well designed Bigfoot too. It's not hokey.
Yeah.
It's not it feels more than just a suit.
Right. It kind of looked like one of those things of, what did they do, man? Get a real Bigfoot for this part?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the whole thing of, well, I don't want to give any spoilers, but the whole story, the reason why this thing's stalking them, was very emotional. I think it added a lot of sympathy to the Bigfoot.
And it's very realistic because we know that Bigfoot has a very, very strong revenge streak. For some reason, these things really will come after you if you piss it off.
Right. And, in that movie, it had every right to be pissed off.
Absolutely.
So
I won't give any for anyone who is into Bigfoot and has not seen that movie. I highly recommend it. I won't spoil it here, but please go watch that movie as soon as you can.
Yes, definitely. And Primal Rage: The Legend of Oma. That's another good one.
Yeah. Speaking of movies, now I know that you said you're going to be wanting to direct one soon. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm hoping to make a very accurate Wendigo film.
Okay, very cool.
And since Antlers came out and they did so well on that one, even though there was some stuff I had a problem with, I want to make one that's really just like spot on. I want to have a lot of Native American, influence on there. In fact, I want the stars to be Native American people. And I think it should be told from their point of view. As a Caucasian guy, I don't feel like it should be my point of view that I'm telling it from. I think it should be told from their point.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Give their perspective and show, really how and why they fear the spirit of the Wendigo so much.
Yeah, and I think when, going down that track, I think there's a lot to be had there, especially when you think about in Vietnam during the war, people were experiencing like the stone apes.
Yes, the rock apes. Yep.
Yeah, I definitely think that there could be like a Vietnamese portrayed film about that experience and that phenomena. That
would be fantastic, actually. And maybe if this Wendigo one ever takes off, I can maybe do a sequel with it where I cover the Genosqua.
Oh, yeah. Now, talk a little bit about that, because that's not really talked about a lot in modern Bigfoot terms. I mean, I've heard Duke Sullivan talk about it on World Bigfoot Radio.
That's my mentor right there, Brian Duke Sullivan. He taught me a lot. Yeah, he's very admired in my mind. So, yeah, Genosqua, it's an Algonquin name for the Bigfoot. It means stone giants. And what they actually derived the name from is the fact that these things were smart enough where they would go and they would roll in sap from the trees, right? And then they would roll in river rocks to kind of create this applique armor. And back in those days, okay, they didn't have flint guns. They didn't have flint rifles or anything like that. They had just, bow and arrows. And these rocks that they had on their fur, embedded on their fur, would deflect and break the arrowheads, leaving the Algonquin people defenseless against these big Bigfoot that would come in and raid their villages. And they say that the Genosqua used to do this high-pitched whistle, almost tauntingly, to let them know, hey, we're coming to your village. Here's the whistle again. And they would come down and would take the kids and the smaller women just to devour them.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard about that. I didn't know that it was the Genosqua that was like primarily responsible. I've just heard about certain Bigfoots having that kind of trait or that behavior.
Yep. And there's a lot of confusion because they think that when they say stone giants, they mean 30, 40, 50 feet tall giants. But no, what they mean is giants as in something bigger than what they were, taller than what they were. So to run an analogy here, kind of think of it as this was ancient people that saw something that was maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. It's like when we saw Andre the Giant. We could be 6.5 feet tall, and he's still a giant compared to us. So we called him a giant. So when they say stone giants, they mean these creatures that were just bigger than they were.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. And there is a story about a couple of Canadian hunters that were attacked by Genosqua. His son was. Anyway, what happened is this rich fur trading family decided to hire a Native American guide to take them on a hunting trip. And he took them to this very remote spot, and there was an island across the way.
Was this in Canada?
Yeah.
Is this Nahanni Valley?
No.
Okay.
This is not too far away. But what happened is the Native American guide kept telling them, you can go wherever you want. I will show you whatever you want on this side. But we can never, ever go to that island. And they would ask him why, and he told them it's forbidden. We aren't allowed to go there, da 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 da. And so what happened is, being too curious for his own good, the son departed to that island. And as he was going to the shore, his father happened to look from the other island through the binoculars. And through the binoculars, he saw this huge, hairy creature barreling down the hill towards where his son was hitting the shore. And his son disappeared into the woods, and a few minutes later, there were gunshots that fired off. Followed by his son trying to run back to where his boat was waiting. This thing was right behind him, and it caught him by the waist with one hand, and with the other hand, it ripped his top half right off.
Oh wow, that's a horror movie movement right there.
Yeah, and so this is why the Native American guide said we can't go there, because it's the home to the Genoswat.
Okay, that's fascinating. I did not know any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I know about Nahanni Valley because I find Nahanni Valley to be of great interest to mine.
I've often theorized that the Genoswat or the Gugwe have something to do with that. Because Gugwe are known as face eaters. And Genoswat are known to kill people as well. So it's like, was it one or the other, or was it a hybrid of both?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think I'd ever want to go there alone.
Yeah, I don't know. It is illegal to be there, correct?
Yeah. Yep, it is.
The more they put restriction on it, the more I want to go there. I can't help it. It's just in my nature.
Yeah, the more they tighten the belt, the more you're kind of going, well, what's there that I'm not supposed to see?
Exactly.
I think they need to realize this about us researchers, man. The more you forbid something, the more we're like, but why? I want to know.
Yeah,
what's
you just
there?
make it more interesting to us the more you tell us we can't go. It's human nature.
Well, it becomes a forbidden fruit at that point where it's like, well, you can't have this. Or we're like, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to take it anyway.
Exactly. I'm going to take it because you told me I couldn't take it.
Yeah, we're going to do it just out of spite.
Yeah.
Come on, that's just how we are.
So when we talk about Bigfoot and we talk about some of the stranger aspects, such as like, how when people say they move like lightning?
Yeah.
How do you, what do you make of that? Do you feel like that's just like they're superhuman, like just really, really athletic? Or do you feel that there's something else going on there? And if you can't tell by now, I'm very in the woo category.
I can tell.
Yeah.
I think it's a couple of things. I don't think it's just one defined category. I think, like we said earlier, that maybe people are seeing like topo, like beings that are taking on the form of, Dogman and Bigfoot. And I think when these things are moving like that, it's because, they do have supernatural origin. But if you want to look on the flesh and blood side, anything that moves faster than us as humans, we're going to say it moves faster than humans. It moves faster than humanly possible. Well, yeah, it moved faster than you because you can't move that fast. You're not used to traversing on terrain like they are. They grew up and they adapted and evolved to move along terrain like that. We haven't.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Is it supernatural?
It's definitely like a perception that plays into all of this.
Right. Well, is it supernatural? In a way, I guess if you say it's supernatural,
it's more. It's a different natural than us.
Right. It's natural for them, but it's not natural for us.
Right. Exactly, and it's a beautiful way of putting it. Let's get into your podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I absolutely can. Yes, it's called Monster Radio. And I co-host that with Ashley Hilt. That's my girlfriend. And she's a researcher as well. So we both know our stuff, but she talks a little bit more than I do. But we record every Wednesday and we upload on Sunday, usually in the morning. So, and for now, we're only on YouTube, but that's because like Spreaker and iTunes and Apple and all that, for some reason, they didn't want to upload our stuff. So I don't know if it was a copyright material thing or they're just being jerks to us. I don't know. But
really,
as soon as
that's
we can
interesting.
upload to other platforms, we will.
Because I know that on Wednesday we talk weird, your girlfriend's other show, that's on Spotify.
Yeah. Like for some reason, she's been trying to upload our stuff over there, and it just isn't working. So I don't know if maybe there's something we've done to the video that they're not allowing. But for now, we're going to be on YouTube. And you can find us every Sunday. We're going to start doing some live streams pretty soon as well. And we encourage people to come into the live chat. If you see that we're doing a live stream, please stop by, ask whatever questions you want. Okay.
Well, I will be there.
Cool. I'm one of those people that the more questions you have, the happier I am. Cater to my happiness and ask me questions. Okay. I love interacting with people.
Perfect. Well, I would love to come on and comment. I don't know if you guys do guest interviews or if it's just you guys talking about certain. Oh,
we
okay.
do, and yeah, we'll have to have you on as well.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. I don't know how much I can contribute just because I'm like really out there with my paranormal stuff. But if you don't mind
you're more than welcome if you have that kind of opinion on stuff, man. Because we want every kind of opinion there is. We don't want to force just one opinion onto you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's how we need to be looking at a lot of this stuff.
Yes, we all got to work together. We're all after the same questions, aren't we? We want to answer them all together, and if we could, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, man. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really enjoyed our talk.
It's my pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, and I will gladly come and comment on your podcast, and I'd love to come on anytime you have me.
All right, I look forward to having you on, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, you have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was my interview with Ryan Paul Tramblay. I love talking with him about his dogman and paranormal experiences and his views and knowledge about Native American legends. As I said before, all his links will be in the description below. If you are enjoying the show but don't like the idea of a monthly subscription, you can still show us support by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It goes a long way for the show and we really appreciate it. Until next time, I will see you again on these strange dominions.